Alright, so I got the north side all metalled up above the porch, so I'm going to start putting on the roof. This part of the porch doesn't get sun until the afternoon, so I want to get this done so if it snows or gets ice on it, it's not that big a deal. I don't have to wait for it to melt off. So got all my trim up, got all my metal up, and now I'm just going to go ahead and get all the metal roofing on this, and I should be able to get that done today and start on the rest of it. So a lot of messing around, cutting around all these windows, but it actually turned out pretty nice. See, this top trim comes out about 2 inches from the window, an inch from the edge of the J, and then it tucks up underneath the steel, and so any water that comes down in there will run out over this and down the side. And then this corner piece, the trim that goes over the steel, basically what I do is I take some scrap pieces and just put those down so I get my spacing right. Bring my ridge trim, get that all put on, and then I make a flashing that comes over the top. I put this rubber flexible window seal tape down over this corner. So underneath here, that's all that rubber flexible seal, so it completely seals that off. Then I make this flashing, and I just put some right there in that corner, heat it up and kind of melt it in there. And so that's all waterproof. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of protection, plus my corner trim is going to come down and come over this and be out here. So water should never get in there. So all my ribs have been lining up perfect except for this one, and I knew this one was going to be a problem. There was nothing I could do about it. It was just on the edge of it. You can see, like right in here, this rib, just a quarter of it. So I made this little piece right here. I don't know if you can see it in there or not. It just comes down and then just angles out over the top, and I slipped it in behind the steel and ran a screw through it so it'll hold it in place. I caulked above it, caulked right in that corner, so if any water gets down in there, it'll take it out over instead of down in this rib. And the good part about this one anyway is if it did get behind there, which it's not going to because of this little piece I made, it would come down right here and come out. So anyway, that's that. I'm going to get this steel put on, and then I'll start working on this section over here. Alright guys, I just have a few pieces right here to do to get this north side of the porch done. Got all my trim and weather stripping in there. I got it in all along the bottom there. So when I cut these, I use my last measurement for this side. And one thing you got to keep in mind, that when I put my piece over, it lays over, is right here. So when I make my mark, I have to make it on the inside of the rib of the steel, otherwise I'm going to end up being off. So how I get my other measurement is these pieces from one side to the other are 37 3/4, so I'll measure from here over 37 3/4, and I'll do that in a couple places, and then I'll measure straight up to get my measurement over here. So we'll do it. Alright, so I got 37 3/4 marked in 2 spots. That way I can line my tape measure along it and make sure I get the right measurement. And then I just go down along those 2 lines That's 34 and 3/8, and I want to add an inch to that for my overhang, so we'll do 35 and 3/8. 35 and 3/8. And then I know that this measurement here is going to be on the inside of the rib, which I'll show you down there, so we'll go measure these. Alright, so this rib here is the rib that will overlap, so I'll take my measurement from inside this, so I'll go up, make my mark, which is, I gotta find it here, it's hard to see, right here, I don't know if you can see it, and I'll mark it in this seam, and then when my angle comes through, I'll make sure my mark goes through that X and continues up and catches this. If I don't, this will end up being short. So I just use a straight edge, connect my lines, and then cut it with the nibblers. More little piece and I'm done. Alright, we're just continuing on this metal up above the porch, and we're having to get all our flashings and trims in place. So as you can see, I got my valley flashing down. It overhangs an inch on the end. And then how I'm attacking this peak up here is how I've done all the other points where trims meet, and that's with this flexible seal, and I think that this is going to work awesome. If any water gets behind my mechanical trims, I have this flexible tape here that goes up the wall, comes down in the corner, and then overlaps like 4 inches out here, so there should be no chance that any water can get in there. So that's the best way I've found to do it. And in my mind, I feel like that's the best way to waterproof it. The biggest weak points on a metal sided house is going to be where all your trims meet, your corners, and this is a great way to protect against it. So I think we're ready to put all of our trims up and start metaling now. Continuing on this steel, and I thought I'd share a couple more tips here. One is, how do you keep your screws in line? I know some guys will punch their steel prior to putting it up. That just isn't feasible for me to get all these sheets stacked up by myself perfectly on end and then punch them all. I can't do it by myself. So what I do is I use a level. Once I get my next piece of steel up, I'll show you how I do it. So hopefully you can see that. It's kind of windy, so sound will kind of be bad. But so I got a piece or a screw started here, and I want to transfer that across so it continues straight. So what I do is I take a level and I take my pencil and I put it in the center of that screw and hold it down to the level, and then rotate the level until I'm perfectly straight. and then I hold it, and then I mark on each side of the rib. And that works out good for me. Maybe it won't for you, but that's how I've done this whole building, and I've got nice straight lines without having to pre-punch my steel. Now I would like to, if I had a couple guys working with me and I could lay out all my steel and get it nice and stacked, then I would probably do that. But it just isn't, and I have so many windows and different things I got to cut around. It makes it real difficult. So this is how I do it. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do here is the next piece here is going to go up and over this peak here, this A-frame that I tied on in front of the door. So how do you measure for that? So basically what I do is I'll measure from the rib, and I'll measure over the distance of a full sheet, which is like 37 3/4, and I'll do that in a couple different spots, which I've done, and now I got to make a line with the level. I don't know if you can see that. Now I know where the edge of my piece of steel will lay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that same thing. I'm going to measure from that side to the peak, which I did, and I made a mark. And then I'm going to take that same measurement and I'm doing it up here, and I'm going to strike a line. So now I have some reference points that I can measure to get this cut out properly. So this is kind of difficult up here on the roof, holding the camera, measuring. The first thing you're going to do is get your overall length from top to bottom, and you're going to get that piece cut, which I do. So I measured from the top down to the bottom and got my piece cut to the length that I want it. So I know that I got an 1/8 inch plate up at the top, and that's what I'm going to base all my measurements off when I'm coming down. So now that I got that done, I'm going to make a measurement from here to there, leaving myself a 1/4 inch right there, and that's 14 3/8. As you can see, I got a little diagram. And then from there to the peak, I'm 27 3/8. Now what I'm going to do is, I know my piece of steel ends right here, so I need to get a length measurement on this one. I need to get a measurement from the top down to there. So that's what I'll do now. So we're 62, 61 5/8. 61 5/8. Not bad. Figures that this landed right there, but I think we're good. So one thing I was going to show you guys, it got too dark last night, is on these little hips or peaks, what I like to do is take a couple pieces of J-trim and just tuck them up underneath the steel, so any water that comes down will hit this J-trim and then come out right in this valley. And there's a finished valley trim that'll go there, but then there's no chance that anything gets down in there. So it's just another layer of protection, just a little something I like to do. There'll be a piece of trim that comes over, covers this, and tucks right under the edge of that. I got to order that piece because I put this A-frame thing over the door was an afterthought, so I got to order a piece of trim for the top of that, which shouldn't take super long to get. Alright guys, I'm working on steeling this peak above the A-frame right up there, and my last piece I have to cut like just onto the just cut the first rib off basically so it's lined up. So now I don't have a rib to keep the water in, so I'll show you. I had to rip a piece so you can see there would have been a rib right here. I had to cut that off, and when you do that, your trim will come over and down, but since you cut that rib off, you need to bend the edge up, and it doesn't have to be much, you know, like a 1/4 inch, 3/8 is enough. That way if any water gets under that trim, it'll encounter that and go down and drain out. So I'll show you on the next one how I bend that. I don't have any high dollar roller benders. I just use some basically I use these for HVAC, and it definitely can be used for this too, so I just use these, but I'll show you on the next piece. And if you can see on there, there's little marks, and I just go between the first, basically right around the first one, line them up on both sides, and then you're going to just slightly bend up, and you're just going to do that all the way down, just a little bit at a time. You're going to probably do, it's going to take you a series of 2 or 3 trips to get it bent up at a 90. Alright, so that's it. So you can see that's bent up now. So then when that trim sits here, if any water gets under it, it'll counter this and roll down. You know, they make a nice roller tool. If you do this for a living, then it would definitely be worth getting them. But if you're just doing this for your build, if you plan your house out right, so if you're planning on steeling it, and you should try to make your dimensions of your house multiples of 3, because that's what these sheets of steel are, and then you really don't run into this problem. I ran into it on this peak, which was an afterthought, and then I think I had to do it on the very end of the garage because that was not a multiple of 3. But other than that, it's not too bad. You won't have to do it too much. So just a pair of those, you can get them, pick them up at a store. You know, any hardware store usually has them, and they're pretty. You know, they're probably $20 or so. So we're gonna get these up and then move on to the last half of the roof here. Ridge trim on, and don't get too caught up. I mean, you want this to be, obviously, I want everything to be perfect, but you know, you'll find out that nothing is absolutely perfect. So another thing you got to keep in mind is if you're putting gutters on this, you're not going to see any of this anyway. So don't get too caught up. Once you put your metal over the top, put your gutter on, none of this is ever seen. You still want to do a good job, but don't get caught up if it's, you know, like right here I have a little, you know, bend or whatever, but all that will get pushed down and pulled tight once I put my steel on the top. So I'm not too concerned about it. So now I'm going to put my ridge trim on. So what you start out with is this J trim, and it's reverse J trim. So your color's on the inside because your steel is going to go up in there, and then your ridge snaps into both of these. So what I like to do is I like to put the ridge on, get my distance right, get the edges trimmed, and then work my way up. Alright, now I'm going to go up there and do the same thing up at the top. Make sure I have a nice straight line. And then we'll cut this and bend this over an inch so you get a nice finished look. Alright, so I got it tacked in 3 spots. And now I'll go down here and trim off those ends and get them folded over. And then I'll add, I gotta add some pieces in up here to get it all the way up to the peak. Alright guys, so I want this to be bent over an inch like that. So you gotta match up this angle with the edge of your roof, and then bend over, mark it, bend over an inch on each side. You see kind of how I folded it under. I'll fold this side under. I just use these benders that I got, and then I'll square this front off here. So just got to fill in that up there. And then I'll be ready to put the rest of the steel up above the windows and across the roof. So. Alright guys, well, I finally got all of the steel above the porch on the house, and I got all the steel on the roof of the porch, so I'm pretty excited about that. That took me way longer than I thought it should have, but if you look up there, I mean, I had to trim around all these windows, and I mean, these pieces that went in here were a lot of work cutting, and a couple of them I had to cut a couple times just because I didn't, they weren't exactly how I wanted it. So just keep in mind, when you put a bunch of windows in, you're creating a lot of extra work for yourself, but I'm not disappointed that I put this many windows in. I think it's going to be unbelievable when it's all finished, but all I have left on the house is the metal underneath the porch, and I think that'll go pretty fast. And then I got to order a couple pieces of trim for my peak, and then I'm going to get onto this garage. So I appreciate you guys watching, and I've chosen a guy that I'm going to have do my spray foam, and I met with him today, and I just wanted you guys, if you have any questions that you want answered about spray foam, leave them in the comments of this video. He's agreed to do a question and answer with me about spray foam, to answer any questions we might have about it. Is it worth it? Is it not worth it? The difference between closed cell and open cell. Any questions you have covering spray foam insulation, leave them in the comments here of this video, or send them to us like on our Instagram page, and I will ask him as many questions as I can when we finally meet up to do this insulation, this spray foam insulation. So I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's going to be awesome. So appreciate you guys watching, and we'll catch you on the next video.